Greetings and welcome to Growth Hacking Secrets. I'm your host Mohammed Siddique from Atlanta, Georgia, and the co-author of New Success Secrets, available on Amazon. On this episode, we have a special guest, Dr. Dan Hill. Dr. Hill is the host of Dan Hill EQ Spotlight, and he gave me the permission to call him a Dan. So I'm going to please join me to give a warm welcome to our guest, Dan Hill.
Happy to be here. Look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Dan. Let me start with this. Where were you? What happened? Who you were surrounded with that inspired you to start Dan Hill's EQ Spotlight?
Sure. In 1998, I was working for a small consulting firm looking at the customer experience and trying to ghostwrite a book for the company president. My good fortune was he had a friend at IBM who sent over an article from a now deceased Cornell University publication called American Demographics, because the article talked about the breakthroughs in brain science and how much we are intuitive, sensory, emotional decision makers. In fact, the killer statistic is that the conservative scientific estimation is that about 95% of our mental processing, our decision making as consumers is on that emotional basis. And I knew that business was not realizing that, let alone leveraging that fact. And when I finished reading the article, my hands, quite honestly, I was trembling. I was so excited by the prospect of this that I simply said, I have to go here. This is the real next, gold rush of American business.
Wonderful gold rush of American business. So, Dan, when I went on your website, we are going to share in a moment. You see there's two currencies in a life. One is the dollar sign, which everybody knows. The second one is?
The second one is emotions, because emotions drive how we make decisions. The biggest lie in life is probably the one we tell ourselves, which is, I'm a rational decision maker. It's simply not true. Emotions motivate us. They inform what we're going to remember afterwards. They are stamped onto our personalities. So in so many ways, emotions really are in the driver's seat. And we are the passive recipient of how those emotions direct us as consumers, as business leaders, as employees, as allies in business, everything.
Is that the reason why the NLP speakers sell a lot more? Because they're manipulating the emotions, or if manipulating may not be the right word, reactivating the emotions or something?
Yes, I think anyone who's going to be looking at a way to be more sensitive, more empathetic to customers, to employees, is going to do better in business. I think it just makes sense. I'm just reading a book now about AI, artificial intelligence, and it says what we're going to have in the future is that the machines will do the thinking for us. Human beings, our real value add is going to be our emotional intelligence, our empathy. That's what's going to take us forward in the business world.
Wonderful. Dan, I'm so glad you are our guest today. So based on your experience of this all market analysis and EQ, what are the top 3 missteps to avoid when you are running your business?
Well, one, I think, is that you have to realize people make really quick decisions. They're looking for the easy route. So I think when I went into business, I probably somewhat underplayed the importance of applying for and trying to win awards, because people won't always take the time to check out the quality of your offer or understand really what are all the components. So they want the quick, easy sign off. And I think all of us should recognize that in business, that people want the quick landmarks. Another thing I think that's really important is to accrue allies, because people are emotional decision makers. It means that you got to do the small talk. The small talk is actually big talk. It's quite possible they're going to buy from you based on liking you as much or more than your offer, which they have a difficulty assessing. The third thing I think I personally made a mistake a bit is I was so busy and I never had a partner in the business. So I didn't have as much time for his employees as I wish I had. And so trying to navigate that is always difficult. And I think sometimes I just went on trust, but trust and verify is a better approach. And sometimes I should have recognized, as Greek philosophers said, character is destiny. And in some cases, even with some empathy, you can't necessarily turn around the situation. Some employees are probably better off, cutting the line and moving on to somebody else.
Yeah, wonderful. That's a great lesson. So Dan, because you know so much about the data and you know how the two currencies works, because I was thinking it's probably a Bitcoin second thing. I said, no, it's not Bitcoin, it's emotions. So uh, before you understood all this, there was probably some kind of failures in your life. You probably would like to share with your single most professional failure, and what did you learn and how did you recover from that?
Sure. I'm not sure. I'm delighted to share it because it is painful. But I did go through a divorce where my wife at the time had fallen in love with someone on her staff at work. But I decided to seize an opportunity from that, and I was certainly having a lot of emotions. And I decided that this was a good opportunity to learn about my emotions, and it's when I started the path to becoming an EQ expert. And then that work into EQ led me to say, okay, so emotions matter, the intuitive matters. How can I capture and quantify that? And that led me to discover facial coding. And facial coding is really the system that's going to go forward to help us quantify people's emotional response using technology. This is something that Google and Apple and Facebook are all automating. It's something, frankly, that the Chinese government for instance, is already using, not necessarily for good reasons. But that journey, I took that pain and I said, I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow. And by the way, I ended up making a very nice career out of it.
And never making it. So that's a great wisdom. It's, you took the positive side to learn from that and end up in making a career. That's a great one. Thank you, Dan. Then let's switch this side. So what are the top 3 success secrets? Give us your best one. You probably have a lot more, I can tell, because you have a lot of data. Give us your best one. Don't be stingy,
Well, but my favorite one is that for CBS, I was asked to test 5 new TV shows. And I got done and I turned in the results to Dave Poltrak. And I said, so what did the more traditional research tell you, the one that wasn't using facial coding to quantify emotions? And he said, they said that all 5 TV shows were more or less equal. And I almost fell to the floor laughing. I said, no. Based on our results, there's one you should put all of your money behind. And that one was the TV show called Big Bang Theory, which made an awful lot of money for CBS. The other 4 shows, by the way, 2 of them were canceled almost immediately, and none of them got out of the first season. So that was a big success, certainly for the company and for CBS.
Yeah, for CBS. And 2 more.
We also did a project for Nike. We were looking at some tennis shoes. They had one that was very high priced. They were a little bit worried about that price point. We had consumers try on the tennis shoes and walk around, and we looked at their facial expressions. There was an unusually large amount of joy on their faces. And we said, just take the money to the bank. Do not reduce the price point. You do not have to do that. The third one is I've also done some work both in professional sports and as an analyst for CNN and Fox and MSNBC, looking particularly at presidential candidates. So I can tell you that at one point I was on Fox, the morning show, Fox and Friends, and the guest just before me was going to be Karl Rove, the former primary advisor for George W. Bush. And I said to him, Barack Obama is going to take the Democratic nomination over Hillary Clinton. And he had come to recognize that fact, but about 4 months after I had. And so the facial coding, because I was looking at how the candidates' expressions were, the kind of the product, so to speak. I was also looking at voters' reactions in real time, both in Iowa and on televised town hall meetings and so forth. And so I was actually very prescient as to where that election was headed, who the candidates were going to be.
So is it fair to say you are the master of the second currency emotions?
I think I am. I have done this for a long time. And one of the reasons I probably have an advantage is that my family moved to Italy when I was a 6-year-old boy. So I went to Italian first grade in a fishing village. I did not know the language initially. Italians have a lot of body language. They're famous for that. But the face is really better than body language for picking up how people feel. It's more specific to 7 core emotions, as opposed to just whether they're more open or more defensive in nature.
Yeah. So because it's all about face recognition, basically, all the phones are like, you look at the phone says, recognize you right away. So is there some basic level characteristic of somebody who's watching this now, they can start recognizing better the other side?
Sure, by all means. So we probably should differentiate here. There is, on the one hand, face recognition. That is your identity. What I've been a specialist in is emotion recognition, which is which feelings do you have? So
Yeah.
there are 7 core emotions. And quite honestly, for most people, there are 2 emotions that dominate: happiness and anger. Those are, for most individuals, about 70% of our emoting.
Yeah.
Happiness is pretty obvious, although people may not know that a true smile, uh, as opposed to a social smile, involves a twinkle in the eyes.
Yeah.
The muscle around the eye tightens, you get that twinkle in the eye.
Yeah.
Anger is very important because it may mean that you are confusing customers and your employees, for that matter, that they may not feel like they're making progress. And a really nice sign that someone's feeling anger is that the lips will press together and hard enough that a bulge forms below the middle of the lower lip. If you see that in a sales prospect, it probably means you're in trouble, and you better engender some happiness in them rather quickly if you want the sale.
Mm. Dan, how we can read out more about you? This is a great work. I'm so glad we discovered each other on this show.
Oh,
So that's not only my emotions, by the way. I'm talking about the people who are watching this right now. See, even though you can't see that, I can tell because I am getting questions on this one on this online right now. So Dan, how people can actually connect with you? How the growth hacking secrets community can actually support you?
sure. Well, first of all, I do have a website like everybody else, the obligatory 3 W's, and then sensorylogic.com, as in your 5 senses. There you'll see the 8 books that I've published, including Famous Faces Decoded, which offers up the secret sauce of how to read the 23 expressions on the face that reveal 7 core emotions. There are additional books on leadership, even on art, on business practices, including my book, Emotionomics, which was chosen by Ad Age as one of the top 10 must-read books of 2009, and features a foreword by Sam Simon, the co-creator of the Simpsons TV show.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I do have a podcast I do called Dan Hill's EQ Spotlight. It appears on the New Books Network, which is the world's largest book review platform with about 1.5 million downloads monthly. I also will be launching both a book called The Devil's Dictionary of Work Life and Commerce, and I will be launching post-COVID-19, which is to say this fall, I hope, a series of tours in America, 3-day tours per city, called Faces and Places in America. So there are lots of ways to connect with me. Some are pure business and some are pure fun.
Some are pure fun and some are pure business. Sensory Logic, sensorylogic.com.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. So who is your ideal guest for your Dan Hill EQ Spotlight? Because I'm thinking my brain is working at like 1,000 miles per hour. I want to connect you to some good guests,
Well, that's very kind of you. First of all, I would say about half of my guests have been in the business space. Some of them are more explicitly EQ experts, but not necessarily. Just they have a sensitivity and interest in what motivates people, whether it's leadership or in sales or customer service or managing employees. Of the other half, I would say that about a quarter of those typically are scientists, people who are, in neuroscience, for instance. I just had an award-winning physicist on the show recently. I like exploratory people are full of curiosity. The others are typically writing about politics, or they are fiction writers, authors, poets, artists, things like that.
Wonderful. If you don't mind, I'd like to mention that one of the top name comes to my name. He is my mentor and a business partner. He is a recluse billionaire, Mr. O. $10 billion worth, owns over 160 miles of beachfront properties in the US and around the world, and owns 48 businesses. He is a master of 13 standards of knowledge. One of them is the potential of the mind and psychology and, understanding the other people. I think you will get along very well.
Oh yeah, no, that sounds ideal. I mean, anyone who's interested in the mind and psychology and other people. I can also say that, the best of my knowledge, I've not had any billionaires on the show.
Yeah.
Many of them have been very successful people, but I don't think anyone's cashed in quite that much.
Yeah, no, understood. I will be happy to recommend him to
Okay.
on a guest, and that way give me the opportunity to learn a lot more about him. That's how we want to learn.
Sure. Sure. By
And
all
spread
means.
the good in the world. Any bonus thing you like to share? We are about to wrap up.
Well, I think for anyone who's an entrepreneur, it's really the importance of differentiation. I can't stress on how important that is. When I first came across this American Demographics article, that was great. And then I started exploring, trying to find tools that allow me to capture and quantify emotions. So I ended up with a fairly traditional methodology, and a good friend fortunately blew me up. He said, people don't think their feelings, Dan, they feel their feelings. And if
Mhm.
you follow the traditional tools, you will not have crossed the Alps. You'll have not crossed that hump into a new territory. And
Mhm.
so I did that with the prodding of my friend, and that's what allowed me to be successful. So I think every business, everybody in life in general, needs people who will speak truth to power and
Mhm.
tell them where there are shortcomings, and to never be satisfied. You got to press ahead and find something unique. And then you have to keep reinventing yourself, because God knows the competition will steal from you, and you have to keep finding new ways to innovate. So my father was a 3M company executive, innovations, the byline at 3M. So
Mhm.
I maybe came through it naturally, but it really is important to move forward. And I learned that from going to Italy on to every stage of my life.
Wonderful. Is it okay if we take a one question from the audience?
Oh, by all means.
Mind is a very abstract thing. How to control it?
How to control what? I think the first thing is to understand yourself. We all have characteristic displays, expressions, patterns of behavior.
Yeah.
In fact, George Orwell, the famous novelist, said, by the age of 50, a man has the face he deserves. And I say that because we have resting expressions, we have muscle movements and patterns that set in.
Yeah.
So if someone has a disposition where they tend to be angry, you may not recognize that in yourself, but you may in the mirror. And you may from friends who can say to you, well, you tend to respond to challenges or situations with this emotion, or
Mm.
maybe it's disgust, or maybe it's sadness, or who
Mm.
knows what it might be. But if you know how you feel, that actually gives you a pretty good leg up on how you think.
Yeah, this is a good one. Dan, we are out of time. I love to keep talking to you for hours on this one. Just you know
Well, thank you.
that. Yeah. Thank you, Dan. I like to ask this question to almost every guest to get your guest experience on today's show. So that works as a testimonial for me. So, what would you say about your today's guest experience on the Growth Hacking Secret Show?
Well, I think you're a very warm person. So that's the first thing that I look for and like in somebody. People who are generous. You were kind enough to, suggest the billionaire friend who might be a guest on my show. That's very nice. So I've had a wonderful conversation with you. And I think anyone else who comes on the show would have the same experience.
Thank you for your kind words, especially coming from the emotions expert.
By all means.
I'm going to ask my wife to watch this one. That's very important, So,
Sure. Well, this is a good way to make your marriage work better.
yeah, wonderful. Dan, what would you say as a final word?
Final word, do what you love, and it's going to show. And part of that, I would say, is be true to yourself, because then you'll be true to others. That was advice my father gave. The last thing he said to me when he gave me all this feedback on what he thought of his vendors at 3M Company was, he said, don't perjure yourself.
Yeah,
Honesty should be the core of your brand.
yeah,
And I have always practiced that, and it makes me sleep more comfortably at night
yeah,
because I haven't pulled any fast ones on anybody.
yeah. Wonderful. That's a great. Do what you love. Thank you so much, Dan Hills, the host of Dan Hills EQ Spotlight. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today, especially on emotions, for sharing your wisdom on growth hacking secrets, and on the behalf of growth hacking secrets community and our entire team, we really appreciate you. This is Mohammed Siddique signing off from Atlanta, Georgia. Until the next episode, all good wishes.